This is the Trump Roundup for week number 18, and honestly, I'm at a loss for words. I wish I had the vocabulary to assist me in expressing just how horrific Trump has been this past week. There's just so much. I mean, too much really for me to properly say enough about each topic for them, because each one of them could be its own segment in its own rights. I guess there's no better place to start than like at the beginning. You might recall last week that the Don was wheels up and bound for the Middle East on his Fuck America 2017 tour. And right after we found out that he was bragging to the Russians in the Oval Office about how he fired Comey. So, stop one on the grand adventure for the Prez was Saudi Arabia, a country in which he blamed for being the state sponsors of terror in his previous tweets. And, pretty much all correspondences he had concerning Saudi Arabia were never positive until he visited there this week. And on this trip, he was given some sort of bauble by the king of Saudi Arabia, and he did sort of a curtsy bow kind of thing in order to have it draped on his neck. The only reason I'm bringing that up is because he talked shit on the last guy that did that. So while there, he signed some pretty hefty deals with the government to the tune of over $110 billion in weaponry. And shortly after that, he visited some photo op type of place in the country where they work on monitoring Islamic extremism or some shit like that. But the takeaway was that in the middle of the room that looked like a throwaway set from a James Bond film was a white glowing orb or globe, whatever the hell you want to say it was, where he, the king of Saudi Arabia, and a few others like Sisi of Egypt were there to take a photo of putting their hands on it to start it up. It looked a lot like something that the people on the right would be killing their own kids in fear of a new world order taking place because of. I believe it was the next day when he traveled to Israel, when the wheels started to fall off the 30-ton semi barreling into a crowd of younglings, because he was talking with some collected Israelis about the flight, and he was like, boy, I just got back from the Middle East, and aren't my arms tired? To the Israelis, guys. For those that might be playing the game at home, remember, Israel is in the Middle East. Later on, there was a meeting between he and Bibi where he arose from the meeting and started to walk off like he had some sort of fucking full-blown dementia episode. And that's not all. God damn it, that's not all. That's not even the worst part. He was on camera with Bibi and they were doing some sort of press conference or whatever the fuck they were doing. They were talking and they were mulling in the crowd a bit. When Trump broke the din of the room with his speaking loud and calmly voice about the fact that he never ever said Israel when talking about ISIS intelligence, which means that he performed one of the most face-palming moves that I've ever seen on television, literally cementing that the intel did come from Israel. He's just stupid, people. Like, I can't think of a better term for it. The next stop was the Vatican, which was obviously a hoot for all involved, especially Trump, because he got to tell Catholic Comey that he couldn't meet the Pope. Just to be an asshole. And the best bit is that the Pope said something akin to Melania, like, what are you feeding him? Straight sugar and butter? And yes, of course, they had to trade gifts. And the Pope got books while Trump got the Pope's letter on climate change with the stern, you'd better fucking read this, you simple bastard. And it was just funny because the Pope gave him a look like, and then there's this asshole. So in between here and his next stop, which was Brussels for a meeting with all of the NATO member nations, his Muslim ban was upheld by the same court that said that said hell no a few times before. Anyway, NATO. You'd think that with him going to other nations and making deals with shady countries like Saudi Arabia, he'd be somewhat nice to the members of NATO. Nope. He admonished the collected leaders for not having enough people paying the 2% GDP towards defense. And here's his quote. These grave security concerns are the same reason that I have been very, there's your double right there, direct with Secretary Stoltenberg and the members of the alliance in saying that the NATO members must finally contribute their fair share and meet their financial obligations. But 23 of the 28 member nations are still not paying what they should be paying and what they are supposed to be paying for their defense. This is not fair to the people and the taxpayers of the United States, said the president that wants to increase the defense budget by $60 billion. You want to talk about fair to the taxpayer? How about your health care bill that's going to be removing all sorts of shit? How about your budget that's going to be slashing all social safety net programs? Fair to the taxpayer and fair to the people of the United States? Go fuck yourself. I believe he still has no clue as to what NATO actually does, since he neglected to cite Article 5 of the of NATO for the United States. And if you're wondering what Article 5 is, it's the one where other NATO allies must come to the aid of an ally under attack if invoked, which the only time this has been invoked was after 9/11. So, of course, afterward, Spicy, Pence, McMaster, they all cleaned up the Trump poopy left over, but we're still not done. How about that killer of a budget that I was just talking about there? That was released that plans on cutting just about every social program that we've fought for like the last 50 years. Or even the CBO coming out and saying just how bad the AHCA is going to be for America in the grand scale of over 24 million people losing their health care because of the games and the politicking that are going on right now. And I honestly wish that was all that happened on this trip. Apparently, he was the lone dissenting voice when it came to the G7 summit that didn't endorse the Paris deal on climate change. Oh, and he also bitched to the Brussels prime minister about how hard it is to set up a golf course in the EU. Motherfucker's always thinking about golf. Things escalated even more quickly as Trump apparently did the same, said the same to the EU chief about how the Germans are very, very evil. And you ask yourself, why the fuck would he say something like that? Money. And this is the quote that he got from Der Spiegel. Look at the millions of cars that they sell in the U.S., and we'll stop that. I would say to BMW, if they want to build a factory in Mexico and sell cars to the U.S. without a 35% tax, they can forget about that. Guys, our president doesn't know that a lot of these German cars are made in America. He doesn't get that. This is our president, guys. This is there are ones that do come in from Mexico. I shouldn't say all that here. But most of them are made here and sold to you here. He doesn't even know that you can't pick on one country in the European Union. You have to pick on the entire union, you fucking nonce. There's still even more that I have to rattle off to all you guys because I'm already way more into this heaping shit pile than I want to be. But let's see what else our shitty diaper of a president has done. His administration leaked out intel ahead of the UK actually releasing that information about Manchester when they were ready. He made a phone call to Rodrigo Duterte to let him know that he thinks he's doing a hell of a job, and also has had an aside about leaking information about 2 nuclear subs off the coast of North Korea. You don't fucking do that, man. He also got his hands ringed by the new French president, Emmanuel Macron, who had a much firmer grip than he could manage, and later claimed to say that he was hoping that Macron would have won the race for president of the country instead of tossing his hat in with Le Pen. We have Google. We know that you did not like Macron when he was running, and you can't come back and be like, oh yeah, I hoped he would have won anyway. No, you were like going straight for Le Pen. And for the biggest shit-filled cupcake that also has a solid gold core in it, is that we now have intelligence coming out from the Washington Post, among other sources, about a possibly from pissed off NATO member nations out there that Jared Kushner had sought to use Russian embassy phones in an effort to have a way of talking directly to the Kremlin without government oversight. And people are defending this. The right is defending this. I don't see a problem here. That's a good thing. When the hell will people realize that they've been sold a bill of goods that will never be delivered? America has a shitload of healing that's necessary, but without people on the hard right making any kind of headway and showing the slightest bit of buyer's remorse, we're not going to get anywhere. It's just going to keep getting worse.
Android.